extend our compound inequality knowledge, and we are going to be able to write a compound inequality given a graph of the situation. And you are also going to be able to utilize interval notation today. That's your 2 learning targets. So writing from a graph, you have 2 compound situations. You're either an or an and your expectation is to know which one is which. An or goes in separate directions. It doesn't happen at the same time. An and is smushed between 2 numbers. It's in the middle. Okay? So I do have, it's hard to read here. Whoops, it's all together. But it's, an or always looks like this. X is smaller than the left number, or X is bigger than the right number. That's what it says on your note. So it's always X is smaller than whatever the left, or X is bigger than whatever the right number is. However, you have to remember sometimes you need to put a line under it if it's colored in. So looking at this first situation here, I should always start with X is less than for an or statement. X is less than what? What is this? 3, 4, 5, 6. That's -6, and it's colored in. So it's X is less than or equal to -6, or X is bigger. What's this? 0, bigger than or equal, because it's colored in, to 0. So if you're given a graph, you need to know how to write the compound inequality, whether it's an or and an and. Notice how the next ones get in separate directions, so I definitely know it's an or situation. You always start with X is smaller than the left number. My left number is -1, and it's not colored in. Or X is bigger than the right number. My right number is 8, and it's colored in, so I'm going to put the equal sign in. X is bigger than or equal to 8. This one's kind of cool. I got one circle. It's still an or situation. Notice that it's just colored in and it's going in 2 separate ways. So how you write this is X is smaller than, what is that, 1? 1. Or X is bigger than 1. So pretty much it's every number on the number line except for 1, because 1 is not colored in. So it's X is smaller than 1 or X is bigger than 1. So if you're given an or compound from a graph, you need to know how to write it. Ands are kind of, notice that, how I always tell my kids, ands are smushed in between. That means X needs to be smushed in between. So notice that I have the little diagram formula for you here. Its left number is smaller than X, which is smaller than the right number. X is in the middle. So it will always look like this. Number smaller than X, smaller than whatever the other number is. And sometimes you have to put a line under it. So here, I think that's a -6. I cannot read this at all. And then I have a 9. So it's going to be -6 is smaller than or equal, because it's colored in. X is in the middle, which is smaller than or equal, because it's colored in, my right number of 9. So notice I'm just following this little diagram. Left is smaller than X, which is smaller than the right. Okay, my left number here is -10, not colored in, so it's just -10 is smaller than X, because X is in the middle, that's the and, which is smaller than or equal, because it's colored in, 2. That's a 2. So it's always the left number is smaller than X, which is smaller than the right number. That's how we do the ends. This one, my left number is 0, is smaller than or equal to X, which is smaller than or equal to my right number, which is 8. Okay, so our next learning target is interval notation. Interval notation deals with parentheses in brackets. Okay, that's what we're going to be dealing with today. You're going to have parentheses with today, and you're going to have brackets with today. Parenthesis means it's not included. It would look like this, like an open circle. A bracket means that it is included. That's when it's colored in. Notice it's like the line that's under an inequality symbol. That's how I made that connection when I was first learning this. Parenthesis means it's not a line. It's not a solid line. It's a curve, so I'm not coloring it in. Okay. Interval notation, you have to remember, you use infinities. So you're going to be using infinities a lot. Negative infinity, positive infinity. And that's the number line for us. The number line goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. You also need to know that when you write it, you go left to right. When you write in compound and interval notation, you have to go left to right, just like you read and write. So I'm going to say, okay, what's my first number? -4. So watch how I'm going to do this. So given this number line, I'm going to write it in interval notation. So I'm going to go left to right. So I'm taking my index finger and I'm saying, okay, my first number is -4. Is it colored in or not colored in? It's not colored in, so it's going to be parenthesis, -4, comma. Okay, the comma means that I go to. So this is saying my graph starts at -4, and I'm going to go to, what's my last number? 4. Is it colored in? Colored in means bracket. So that is interval notation. Notice it doesn't have infinity. Now look at the graph, you should see that infinity is never included. Infinity on a graph, means it goes to infinity. Do you see? It goes all the way, it just keeps going and going and going. And compound does not go to infinity. It's just smushed between two numbers. So you should not have infinity involved at all. Okay, my next one. Going left to right. So what number do I start at?
-6.
No.
0.
0. I start at 0.
That's the next one.
Is it colored in?
Yes.
Yep, 0 is colored in, so it will be a bracket. 0, comma, and where do I go to? 3. Colored in, bracket. And I don't know why I have all these ands. I should have some ors in here. The ors have infinity, ands don't. Okay, we'll just do this next one, then we'll make our own. So again, you go left to right. So my first number is -6, not colored in. So I do parenthesis -6, and it goes to, that's what the comma means. Comma means goes to -3, not colored in. Okay, so that's the ands. So and compounds, no infinities. Okay? The ors are what have infinity. So we're going to do a couple of them. So make 3 number lines. And have them go from -3 to 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, -3. Okay, I'm going to pause while you make that. Okay, so now we have our OR graphs made, and I just want to reiterate that you always start left to right, because these OR ones get a little bit confusing when you do interval notation. So I'm starting left to right on my first graph here. What number do I start with? Where am I? Where's that arrow go to? Say negative infinity. No, yes, it does go to negative infinity. Notice that there's no number that you actually write down because it keeps going all the way to the left. So you actually start at negative infinity. So you would write negative infinity. You can't color it in, so that's why it's a parenthesis. You cannot color negative infinity in because it doesn't exist. Comma, and then where does it go? Now remember, you go left to right. So what number do I go to? -1. Not colored in, parenthesis. Or, now again, left to right. What's my next number I stop at? 1, colored in, so bracket 1, comma, and then where do I go? Infinity. I go to infinity. And you can't color infinity in, so it's parentheses. So again, what I'm doing there is reading it left to right. Where do I start? Where do I go to? That's everything that goes in my mind. Where do I start? Where do I go to? Now, this middle one here. Where do I start at? Negative infinity. I start at negative infinity on that one. Because the arrow keeps going to the left. So I start at negative infinity. You can't color it in, so it's parentheses. And then I go to, now again, you're going left to right. I go to this number, which is 0. Colored in, bracket. Or, again, going left to right, my next number is 3, colored in. So bracket 3. And then where do I go to? Infinity, parenthesis. Notice my strategy, left to right, left to right. You just, with the ors you have that or in between. You stop, so you say you go negative infinity to a number, or then the next number to positive infinity. Okay, next. Where do I start with this one? Where do I start? I start at negative infinity. Now maybe it's a struggle knowing how do you know that's where you start? Well, notice there's no real number. It's just an arrow. So an arrow just keeps going and going and going. That tells me I'm going to start at the negative infinity. So I go negative infinity, following it to the right, to this number. What is this number? 2. It's 2 not colored in, so parenthesis. Or, I'm still at that number, right? Tricky. I'm still there. I'm still at 2, going all the way to positive infinity. So, just to summarize here, and I wrote it on the left, and it will be helpful for you with your homework today. If you have an and graph, which means you're smushed in between, there's no infinity symbol. If you have an or graph, that's like our bottom 3 there, where they're separated and the arrow goes on for infinity, that's when you're actually going to use your infinity symbol. And you need to remember that you go left to right. You always, where do I start? Where do I go to from left to right?